Everybody, welcome to our second episode of the Success Series. I'm here today with our guest, Jamie True, alongside our co-host, Michael Kanowski. Jamie's a serial entrepreneur based in the UK. He has led a wide variety of successful businesses from start to finish. He's also invested in private companies himself. And we're excited to have him on here today. He has a wide array of wisdom to share with us, going from his spiritual journey to his professional journey. And Jamie, the floor is yours. We'd love to kick it off.
Nice to meet you. Everyone, Michael and David, obviously, we know each other pretty well. Well, I never feel like I'm that successful, right? So I think that's the first thing I would say.
Always more, right?
There's always more. I was in a restaurant once. It was a hamburger place, and it said, "You're only as good as your last burger," right?
That's good.
And I always generally, honestly feel like I haven't quite hit my top gear yet. So which is a good thing. So there's some kind of hunger burning there to just keep doing better the next time. And what's been interesting just in my career is I would say being able to invent things but become really great businesses that can flourish. So I think for me the big exciting part of the business, which is the starting part, is actually, can you create something which is a value prop which is any good? Because it's so easy to think, oh, I've got an idea, but when you really put that to the road test, it doesn't stand. And I think that a lot of people don't put enough time and effort in that area. So my biggest sharing point, I would say, is great to come up with ideas. Have you been able to play ping pong with the idea? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? And I think that just creates, an expansion of maybe have I invented something which is enough to be successful, right? And then the next thing is, when you take that and you map it against the actual financials of how that may look like, it then opens up a whole narrative. But actually, I have found something I like, but actually doesn't make financial sense. So now I need to then change it. So I think that's I call that the value prop stage, where you can't be emotional and hang on to anything. I just like to bring that into Kabbalistic terms. Everyone, I think it was your mom who said, what's the strongest tree? And everyone would say an oak tree. And actually it's a palm tree, right? Because it can withstand very strong.
Right.
The bend. I would say, that's the biggest thing I would say. You start a business, everyone's come out of Stanford or Harvard and they're really smart and they've got great ideas, and that's great. And what makes you so different? How are you gonna be better from I'd say a competitive point of view? I think being able to bend the most and not hold on to an idea oh, that's how it has to be. So just be able to just flow is
absolutely
that's a key thing.
Absolutely. And a large variety of our listeners are in their late to early teens as well as mid-20s. So for them, they're often questioning, should I pursue this business? They have limited experience, unlike yourself. So when first getting started, what process can you go through to see if your idea is any good or if you should just scratch it completely?
Yeah, I think you have to kiss a lot of frogs. So I think you should start thinking. I think Winston Churchill said there's no such thing as failure. There's just feedback, right? So I think
very wide.
I think you just need to think that I'm inventing things. I'm in that space, and probably 90% of things I'm coming up with will end up with a dead end, but there'll be something from it. And I think it's more about taking something from it that can be used when at the right time with something else. Everything's very timely and it comes together. So there needs to be a lot of patience, because you can want to go in a direction, but then not have the perfect value prop. But then you could go into a value prop which isn't in the right direction. So I think the key thing is, when I say direction, it's direction of the zeitgeist of what you want to do, right? So I feel like the best things for me is when I've just gone in, get there, put loads of effort in, it doesn't work out, and I take loads from it. Because then I know when I'm evaluating something else, oh, that's the dead end if you do it that way. And if you do consumer, that happens. And this happens with engagement, and this happens with this. So I feel it's it's a really non-emotional and good way to evaluate. And when is the right time to say, okay, I should do it? When you're certain. It can't be someone else, because to be honest, my first business, I took it to my dad and he said this isn't going to work.
Was that painful? Was that painful at all?
No, it made me
Yeah.
made me work 10 times harder to like prove him wrong. And
Right.
I did actually.
Clearly.
And he loved it. He loved it. He didn't mean that in a bad way. He
Sure.
just understand like online. He was old school. It wasn't his dig. But I guess when you've got something good because
Right.
when you think about it, everyone goes, "Oh yeah." There's a moment where someone's like, "There is a gap. There is a moment." It's not just okay. It's like, "Yeah, that sounds really strong,"
Right.
and
And
you feel it, right?
completely,
Yeah.
completely. And so going off that, I think oftentimes you're always uber confident in your idea, regardless of whether it's good, especially at an early age. So there's a constant dilemma. Some entrepreneurs say you have to chase your passion. Others say that it's more important just to find a business that'll make money from the get-go. Do you believe there's an overlap? Is there one better than the other? Or?
I like that you should make money, and I like that you should be like do something you're passionate about. So I think they're both good. I do also like the idea that you do something which is going to work, that makes sense. Because it's that you can quickly become not passionate. I guess if you get into a business that you're passionate about and it passionately doesn't work, you can
Yeah.
get dispassionate about what you're doing because
Right.
it will make you feel bad all the time. So I guess the key thing is, is it right? Who's going to benefit from it? Does that work for me? And by the way, it's never exactly how you want it to go, like any direction. So like, why do we need to hold on to I'm doing it in that way? That's the palm tree thing. Because I guess if you think that it has to be that way, that might be a way that doesn't drive any kind of commercial opportunity. So you need to ask yourself, do you want to do a business to be a charity or to be commercial or to be just mum and pop? But it all depends on the type of business, because I guess you can do something where it just provides the lifestyle and it works if that's
Right.
and that's good. But then you can do something which is maybe fit for maybe investment or VC or funding or sale, or you can just do something for a passion project. So like, I think all are valid. Just me, I love the idea of like, it takes something, grow it super fast, but becomes super valuable and people want to invest in things.
Right.
But I
So
do
just
know a lot of
fine.
people
Yeah.
too, I know a lot of people too who do things for passion project and they get so much joy, like singing and like creative arts. Yeah. And
Sure.
it's amazing.
Absolutely. So just be clear with what your exit strategy is ultimately, and then pursue however you'd like, right? That's the
If you want an exit strategy, I think that's the
yeah.
problem because like one has to put the right magnifying glass on what of your own life of why you're doing it, right? So if it is for passion, great. If it is just for lifestyle, great. If it is to grow something where you can, raise money and like take on investors and stuff, you have a different cadence and
Right.
you have, it's just a different way of life.
And
So
Jamie,
Absolutely.
you mentioned before about creating, how that because you're able to create, then businesses were able to come, ideas were able to flow. Looking back in the early times when you were starting to get into business, maybe this is, maybe even high school or after high school, I'd love to hear a little bit of your story. But were you always a creator, or did it have to take certain steps or efforts to get into that headspace? If yes, what helped you to do that?
yes, I think I've always come up with the idea, but it could be off the idea that someone gives you and you just make it better to be fit for purpose. So then I wasn't really the creator, or was I? I don't know. Could be. And the other thing is, which is interesting, is like all the value is there. I can't say it enough. People don't, if you get that right, you don't have to refactor, go back, change your sales model, change your product. All the value is getting that right. So why not spend extra time there? Because if you get that right, sales becomes easier, product fit becomes easier. So people want to get out of that quickly because they want to get out and start.
Right.
They want results. They want everything quick.
Yeah, and the thing is, let's move, let's do it. It's fast, I'll fail fast, all that kind of great. Yeah, I like that too, but not on that part, because that's strategy. That's like, where do I fit? How am I going to fit for years? And then what happens when someone changes their model to adapt against me? How do I counteract that? So if you want to play this ping pong game, do it up front without losing money, because you can play it out. It's actually
Right.
quite fun to play it out. People don't like it because it pours water on the fire a bit for them, possibly.
They want the honeymoon phase. They want the high. They want the rush quickly, completely.
Honestly, I've had many times where I thought I had a great idea, more than the ones I've started, where
Yeah,
I've had to pour water on it and say it's on hold.
really. And they felt initially more exciting than your current. That's interesting.
Many times.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Do you have a vetting process of individuals you seek when you're like, I love this idea, you vetted it out internally. Are there people you go to beyond that, or is it complete trust in yourself? I know you have a partner, but beyond that.
A good question. So, depending on what you're doing it for, so if it's for the VC side, I can talk to that rather than the lifestyle or just for personal, enjoyment.
Sure.
I definitely think when you've got like an exec summary, like asking a few people who know what they're doing, asking is a good thing. I mean, 100%. And the truth is, they'll logically give you some really good ideas, but the reason they're a VC, they're not an entrepreneur.
Completely. And that's why I've come to you, I think. Yeah. Right.
The problem is
Yeah.
the entrepreneur is going to take bad odds. The VC won't. So like an entrepreneur is going to say, well, look, I've got a shot, but it's like trying to blow up the Death Star and you're Luke Skywalker in your little vehicle, right? It's not an obvious situation. It's not an obvious one. So I would say that you're going to need to take advice because it help the value prop. Oh, do this, do that. Brilliant. Like take all of that. But I take it as how to help build my moat. But the truth is any kind of business you start, even if you value propped it really well, there's a next phase of what you need, which you're going to have to execute on. And that's not taking good odds. So you have to be very resilient.
Absolutely. So let's go a bit back now. So obviously you've been studying Kabbalah for many years now. You were successful prior to Kabbalah. So I think, right, so to an extent, we'd love to hear from you what success is all relative, right? But you had some monetary success prior. So for our listeners who maybe haven't studied Kabbalah before, what would you tell them has been different in your life before and after Kabbalah?
So from a business perspective, you get to create, it gives you better perspectives to understand the people that you're working with. Where is their motivation from? Is it from, I think what Kabbalah does really well is it lets you understand the soul and the ego and the difference between them both. And what's the motivation of people around me, my motivations. So it enables you to almost have a perspective of where is this coming from? And I'd say 100% getting you into the sharing, giving before receiving, the less reactivity, being able to deal with the reactivity, being able to deal with people, being able to share with people in a hugely different way. And I'll say positive way, because anything where you can have restriction and understanding, more empathy toward a situation, still be massively action orientated, but being able to have that perspective is not taking things personally. If I would take things personally, much more about what.
Would you say taking things personally comes from the ego and not the soul?
Maybe, but it could be. But I also think that for me, it was more of the not having the ability to believe that everything is a gift. So the fact that everything comes from a place of actually was meant to be gave me an opportunity to think, wow, that's great. I can pivot because it's meant to be this way and feel positive about it, rather than like, that shit just happened and that annoyed me. And now I'm taking it personally. And why did that happen to me? So I think there's a state of consciousness of, are you a victim or are you proactive, right? And I think this is a very topical time right now of that, because if anybody wants to feel in victim, it doesn't normally have a happy ending, typically. So I think it's much better for longevity and growth to always be in not why has this happened to me, as more as this has happened to me because.
And I think that's very prevalent in our generation, right? There's the whole mentality I deserve to have because I'm so smart and I'm so great. And I'm sure you probably haven't hired too many millennials and Generation Z, probably from that.
Not true, they all are.
Oh, they all are. Okay, so maybe you're picking a gold from a pocket of pennies, right? I mean, do you believe that the entire generation is hungry, motivated? Because from my perspective, I've seen both sides of it for sure. I fall into that category. I don't think I'm like the rest, but majority of my generation seems to have won everything without really putting any effort into receiving it. So what is your take on that?
I just have to select well. That's why I'd want to work with you, David.
Off camera, we'll talk about that.
But I guess, I guess you can tell very quickly where I think it's a mentality and a consciousness. I think it was there before, just people didn't talk about it so much. And I just think that it's maybe there's a lot more entitlement, but I think the danger part is like victim, and then people around that person is victim fueling it, saying, yeah, we're part of this community of victims now, so let's just keep going. So I think the bigger risk is like not the individual victim, but like when it comes collective as well, but it comes like bad culture, right? So yeah, you don't want that, I guess. I mean, I personally have to stay out of it. It's like if and in management style, it's like this is the proactive, we're doing that, we're going there, going forward. I try not to allow it. Like why think that way? Let's just go that way.
This is the system that we're flowing in. You can join with it, or there's not a place for you. It's essentially,
and it's fine. So people tend to, if you're in a business and you're working with people, if you tend to stay that way, people who are just don't like that just tend to leave themselves. You don't have to, people just tend to move. Interestingly, I found that like people who I've worked with in the past who haven't been proactive and been reactive, just by keeping going, those people just tend to go in to find other jobs somehow. They just fall off. So
absolutely. And so we spoke about the path. You're obviously very successful now with all humility added to it. For a younger audience who doesn't know if they want to be an entrepreneur, doesn't know if they want to work for somebody else, what are just some practical tips that they can do, whether it's books, podcasts? I know your platform actually probably could be helpful to them now, but maybe you want to touch on that too. But what are some tools?
Yeah, all those things could be helpful, and there's loads, but that doesn't give you an edge, I guess, over someone else who's doing all the same podcasts and stuff as possible. When I was growing up, I did all the Anthony Robbins stuff. I think the best one, I'm going to be quite biased here, is Kabbalah 1.
Really?
Yes, because I guess it sets your mindset into that way where actually then you can really grow. Because I did the whole Anthony Robbins thing and stuff, and as soon as I went to Kabbalah, I was like, wow, no, this is another level. Where it's not just on the surface, and it really resonated with me. So I'd say that's by far got the best content.
How did you study Kabbalah? How did you initially? What was your entry to it?
Okay, so I moved into an apartment with my girlfriend at the time, who was my ex-wife now, and we wanted to put a mezuzah on the door, which I don't know if anyone listening knows what that is. It's
you want to share? Yeah,
it's for luck for the house to protect the home. And I was not religious and not in touch with anybody. So I asked someone for a few phone numbers to call. So I called one. It was a rabbi, actually. I called and he was really rude. So I'm like, I'm not interested in this guy. And then my ex-wife at the time called a guy, but she misdialed. And a guy called Marcus picked up the phone, and that was it. So he turned up to do this, and he ended up being a Kabbalah teacher.
Wow.
And what was really interesting is when he turned up, he said, hey, he did it, and I saw a guy in a hat, and I'm like, you don't look like a rabbi.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, I am, kind of. And then he basically said did he know me from a different life or a previous life, which confused me because I'm like, this is too spiritual for me. And then and what he meant is he from a previous school, and we actually went to the same school. So he said, the fact that you misdialed me, the fact that we went to the same school together, and the fact that I'm here right now doing this means you should probably study Kabbalah. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So yeah, that was the luck, I would call it, if there is. Yeah, luck.
Incredible. And were you privy to any spiritual wisdoms prior to that encounter, or was that the first time you ever were exposed to anything of that sort?
I would say I was hungry for wisdom at the time. I was reading books on codependency and love addiction and avoidance addiction and Tony Robbins, and I went to Fiji, and I was going crazy about. I was having like at that time like meeting girls who were either really too crazy for me, but I really liked them, or I was really bored and then I didn't like them, and I was like trying to figure out why is this happening.
Right.
And also like work-wise, I was trying to figure out like some kind of like consistency of where I wanted to be. So it was a inquisitive time just before, and I was looking for it, definitely. So
sure. And we've heard from your successes, and obviously it's more fun to talk about than the challenges, but of course that's part of any process. So what are some key challenges you faced professionally and maybe personally as well, but that you could share with our audience, and how you overcame them?
I would say the pivoting, which is daily. You can't have a soft stomach for that. So I would say a lot of people, when they get into their work, have to just feel that they're in a turnaround from the very beginning. The minute you're not thinking you're in a turnaround, you're probably in trouble, because things just tend to move massively. How you sell have to be in a turnaround. So it has to be different every time. You can't just do the same thing all the time. It just doesn't work, right? You have to adapt. And so if everything is going that way, the whole value everything has to adapt. And I feel a lot of people just want to get there and it's done. But the truth is, it is never done. You're always 6 months away from the app to be perfect, 6 months away from the sales to be everything's always work in progress. And I feel like the biggest challenge, I guess, for anyone starting a business going into it is just trying to understand that is the normal. That is it. There's nothing better than that. People seem to think it's going to get better. It's going to normalize. It's going to be great. It's going to be perfect. There's no such.
Does.
No, yeah. So it's like getting into the hardest learning, I would say, is someone to understand that being in the trenches is as good as it gets. And actually enjoy it. It's actually really good because it's a creative time. It's a time to keep moving. And can you be in the mindset of that uncertainty all the time is fantastic, because it creates a much better opportunity. So I would say I've had that a lot. And it's tested me where, for example, one of my businesses, I moved to LA at the time, and it went to the point of insolvent. I don't know if you know what that word means.
Sure.
So like losing money, and it got to a point where the biggest customer failed. And the guy called me up and said, the accountant said, it's over.
We're closing it down. Right.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? We'll just go raise money. He's like, you can't do that. I'm like, we can. Crazily, he left. We did raise money. 6 months later, we sold it for $50 million.
Wow.
But if I'd have listened and got scared in that moment, it would have been. That's a massive, massive learning.
Completely. At that point, what told you to raise the money? I mean, that was your initial success, right? So how did you have the faith or certainty or confidence, whatever you want to call it, to do that?
I think the pain of closing it down was just too much. And the fact that I couldn't figure it out. So it wasn't like the intransigence of not closing it down. It's like we weren't quite there yet. We just had the movement to get it there. So I just felt like maybe we could make this good, and not everything was all bad. Although it wasn't looking that good, the fundamentals were not ideal. It wasn't an obvious, it was, but we had a plan, and we did turn it around, and we got it into a really good place. But I guess it was being able to feel that we could pivot and do it. If that wasn't there, maybe it's good to put the thing down. I haven't had that yet.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe it's an early warning system, because when it starts going off early, move immediately. And if you're constantly in the move, you don't feel like you're stuck.
Right. And so that's a huge lesson, because I think that's opposite of what many of us have heard growing up and from different business leaders, right? As soon as things don't look great, or if the process is taking too long, scratch the idea and start over. But it sounds like all your successes have essentially come from that ability to move on and progress and change as things adapt, right?
It's true too, what they're saying, but it scratched the idea. It doesn't mean scratch the business. You can keep people and scratch the idea and pivot till you find the right one. So I guess the key thing isn't just like, oh, it's over, burn the books, I'm out. I think it's like, raise this million. I'm going to make every single cent work until it works.
Right. Amazon started as a bookstore. Are they a bookstore today? Right. That's okay.
So I think it's true too. I think maybe they're meaning that as well, because they put their hands up, oh, what do I do next? I've had an idea, I'm done. But if you go into it again, thinking, oh, the idea is in this directionally I'm going that way, I'm going to make it. Actually, it's all about making it work. Then you've got more chance. It's as I said, it's not for the faint-hearted, and not everyone cut out to do that, because it can make people feel, very uncertain. It's a high level of pressure, I think, to take that on as an entrepreneur. But if you do, the rewards are good.
Right. I saw a quote the other day. It said the only difference between somebody who's successful in their business and somebody who isn't is their ability to withstand pressure. And so above all else, sounds essentially that is what you're saying. Yeah.
And I remember reading a book called, I know on your notes before you said like what books or things helped and stuff, but I remember reading Man's Searches for Meaning.
Okay.
By Dr. Viktor Frankl. But I think the clever part of that is the reframing of something when you're in a really bad situation, to find the purpose of where you are, to take it out of that situation is key. I think you need that in your business too, because you need to just have a very good, okay, it's going to work. We're going in that direction, and things will be flying at you, and you've got to really know what to address and what not to, just to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'll ask this question. I know one of our listeners is actually at a seed fundraising for his company that he launched last year. Really cool company. It's a basketball company. They have private clubs. It's a membership based. Definitely will talk to you more about that off camera, but he's looking to raise money and he's going through a process.
It's a gym. It's a gym company.
It's a gym company. It's essentially a basketball private pickup but it's a membership based club. You can do training, ice baths. It's combining basketball into a social club. Really cool concept. They're based in LA, looking to expand, and he's raising a couple million now. And I think he'd love to hear from you. What's the best way to go about raising money? Is there a secret to it? Just any insights you can give on that.
Okay, so I guess the key thing is most investors want to know, does this make sense? And how are you thinking about being able to test this has worked first to prove it? The hardest thing is a seed, actually, because it's like, because it's like there's no background. So I mean, if you can test and get like a test close, but these many people are going to be in, I've got this many pre-memberships sold, I've got this much demand already. So being able to prove and validate some of his theories upfront, like takes away the risk where someone would say, well, I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. You can say, well, I can show you why it's going to work. So I think that's like the best thing to be able to do. It's like to validate why it's good from the customers you're going to, get some commitments from that upfront. And if you do that, it proves that actually this is definitely a demand. Right. So that's like the most important thing, I think.
Absolutely. And so obviously sales carries across business. Does being a good salesman help you raise money, or are they two separate things completely?
I think you need to be a good salesman to be a CEO.
Really?
At the beginning, the CEO has to do everything.
There's no accountant, there's no CFO, there's no CRO.
And if you don't have any customers, you're in trouble, right? So I think you need to be able to do it. You can't start something and say, oh, I don't do the sales part.
Because you wouldn't have got there to begin with, right?
And I think you can't do it saying, well, I don't know anything about tech, so I've just left it to someone else. I think that that's not that wise either. So I think really sales is really important. And I think sales is important because it's a discipline and a cadence. And I guess if you can be good at sales, it means you've got a good sales cadence, which means you've probably got a good product cadence. I guess some people are really good at sales, actually really good at product too, and vice versa, because they believe in what they've talked about, and it becomes like, if it's believable, then people will buy it, I guess. So I think that it's the same thing. So I generally think that the people who are good at sales are probably good at other things. I don't, when someone says I'm just not good at it, it's just that they just don't like to do it.
It's like they don't want to do it. Doesn't mean they can't really succeed in it, right?
I'm shy. I don't like doing that. It doesn't really serve you really much by saying I'm shy. It's like not going to help you with your.
Who cares? Also, who cares, right? It's like,
it's not going to help.
Right. It's not going to help. There's a million excuses to make. I mean, it's I've heard some funny ones. It's too cold. It's too hot. The office is too far. It's raining outside. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? You know what I mean? So.
And I think that it's quite exciting because like I'm colorblind, and I started in the fashion business. That was fun.
What color am I wearing today? Can you see this? Can you see this? Michael's wearing a red shirt. I'm wearing.
Is this red or blue? Is this? How is this?
David, I think you're wearing blue, right?
I mean, I wouldn't know. You tell me. So we'll do a black and white clip for this when we produce it. So
yeah, do black and white. But I guess it doesn't. I think you have to just be. You can't go into. I think in a business point of view, I think it wouldn't be. I think also investors won't like that. Imagine you came up and said, "Hey, I'm a CEO. I'm a great product." I don't know how to sell. It's not my thing. Right. That doesn't bode well. Doesn't make you want to invest in someone. If someone said to you, like, here's my business, but I don't do that part.
Right.
It instantly shows a huge weakness, which you're better off saying, look, I'm not a natural seller, but I'm going to become the best one. It's a much better, it doesn't help raise money. I go back to your mate. I think that you have to assume that you have to take on all of the things that you may be not strong at and become strong at.
Right.
As an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Maybe not as in other ways. I guess the biggest thing is desire. Like, do you really want it?
Everybody wants to make money, right? Does everybody want to do the work to get there? Maybe not, if they knew what it entailed. So
yeah, that's true. It's like it's not glamorous doing entrepreneurial stuff. It's really painful and mind-bending. And if you like that, then it's great.
Right. I think you're a car guy, so right? I think that, people see the tech CEO driving a Ferrari and thinking that was week 2 or week 3 of the business. They don't know the 15 or 20 years that went into getting there. So I think, like you said, if you're able to differentiate and understand the process prior, a lot of people might say this just isn't for me, right? I want the Ferrari, I want the nice house, I want the private jet, but I don't want to work 15, 20 years and learn ins and outs of the business.
Do you know the problem with the Ferrari, which is really interesting?
Tell me.
I love
By the way, if you want to share with our which Ferrari do you have? I know you're.
It's a newer one. It's a newer one. It's a newer one. But the problem with, I used it, like I just got a new one, and I took it for a drive, and I like hit over a curve and I like scratched the wheels. Do you ever have like the alloys? Like,
sure.
Now I don't want the Ferrari anymore.
You're like, it's damaged goods, right? It's damaged goods. Brutal. It's probably too painful, right? I mean, now you're like hyper focused, trying not to hit any curves. You're not even driving it essentially. You're sitting at the house in the garage.
This is the problem. I don't know how we get over that. I don't know what Kabbalah says about that.
I'm sure there's something. I don't know. Michael, you have any insights on that?
I mean, actually, Jamie, I would love to also ask. You mentioned about like Kabbalah 1, how that was probably one of the deepest wisdom that you learned and helped you in your process. And I think a lot of the viewers is watching right now. I think there's a big stigma where people don't understand how like business and spirituality could work together. People think like, oh, like being a Kabbalah student or a spiritual person, it's like, being on top of a mountain, meditating, doing whatever. But reality is that's a complete facade. So I'd love to hear from you, Jamie, and even David, if you want to share, like, is there maybe one tool or one teaching that helped you to become successful, one that comes to mind that maybe helped you get to all this amazing success that you're able to achieve that comes to mind?
I think it goes back to the first point. Like, it's not an or, it's an and. A lot of things, or I could be business or spiritual.
Right.
I could be good or bad. I could be fit or not fit. Actually, I could be. The truth is, it's not. I don't think they need to be put against like that. I think the key thing is, and David's like in the gym, right? You can be eating healthy and work out, but you could do or the other way too.
Right, and maybe see results, but maybe not to the same extent. Right.
There you go. And I think the key thing is, it's like, okay, the spirituality sounds lofty, but it's really practical. Kabbalah is really practical in the Kabbalah 1, 2, and 3, which is, how do I become more resilient? How do I understand the bigger purpose of what I'm doing? How do I understand the difference between the light and the darkness of my life? Why am I here? What's my purpose? These things are directional, and being in business are really good to have. Okay, you can still be all right at business, I guess.
And so I think, that's a lot of people might hear what you're saying and be shocked, because I think Kabbalah still has the stigma. It's a bunch of Buddhist monks or religious rabbis sitting in a room, congregating in a circle, singing songs, which maybe does happen too. But I think the premise of Kabbalah is far beyond that. And so, right, I mean, you're an everyday guy, you're in the business world, and I don't think it's taken away from your life in any way. If anything, it's enhanced it, absolutely. And so I think that's just really powerful, especially for people that have no exposure to Kabbalah. I know in conversations with the friends, it is that stigma. It's a place where people go and get consumed in it, and it's detrimental to their life, and they're locked in this box. But I think it's quite the contrary.
Interestingly, when you go to Kabbalah and they talk about the Kabbalists of the past, they weren't sitting back.
No.
Right.
No, they worked really hard through real challenges. Like brutal challenges at some points, right? So actually, the mindset of entrepreneurialism and innovation and bringing things together and finding that thing is the mindset of Kabbalah. So actually, they're very complementary. They're not against each other. And the key thing is that if you can be, no one in their right mind could say, being more of a victim, I'm going to do better in life. No one's, and if everyone would agree that the more proactive, positive, uplifted you are, is going to get a better result. It has to be, right? It's like,
right.
Just even in a conversation. Now you can make a conversation go very well or go sideways very easily with the way you want to.
In one moment.
So if you checked, if Kabbalah just is a minimum, helped you check yourself to be much better at that, man, it's golden.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so you touched on clearly you work out. I know we can only see the upper part of your shoulders, but there you go. Exactly.
I'm not very good anymore. I'm getting old.
No, you look good. You look good. But and so I think the reason why I mentioned that, I think, right, you obviously you study Kabbalah and you work. Aside from that, what are some other things that you do on a day-to-day, be it working out or mental capacity? What are you doing beyond that you've seen enhance your life and an overall better experience of it?
So I love playing backgammon online.
Sure.
I love it. It's a real challenge. I like always doing things. So sport, I love working out. I love playing sport. I golf, paddle, football. It just nonstop. So
Sure.
I guess from a sport point of view, that's just something I love to do. I find it hard to read. I find it hard to meditate. I find it hard to do stuff like that, where I have to sit still. So that's my work, where I have to try really hard. But anything active and challenging, I love.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're recently engaged, soon to be married. Congratulations. Yeah, right. Turn off the cameras.
Don't get put off. It's okay.
We spoke about this before the podcast, but clearly you've had a journey like anybody else. If there's something to our younger audience, but really anybody, I know it's a desire for many. What are some things you can share on that, as far as attracting a mate who is in line with you and enhances both your experience of life, but also connection between you and them? I think any insight or experience would be helpful.
Okay, so just talk from my own experience, and it's not about someone else. I mean, it's just me. Big mistake is thinking that something or someone else is going to logically help you with something, where it's going to be right because this is more comfortable, or this is all of these things which are kind of, but can come and can go. Thinking that's a good reason to get into something.
Mm-hmm.
Impressive, the parents are so nice, and this is so good, and they're so all of these things which are outside are really nice and good indicators that someone's a well brought up, nice person, but not necessarily good indicator of why you should end up with them.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And I think the best indicator is that if they had none of those things, would you still want to be with them?
Which is a really hard question to answer, right? I mean, if you're infatuated with who they are and they're beautiful, and like you said, they have a great family, oftentimes they were
successful, or they love their job, or all that
right.
stuff.
We often neglect the rest of the package because the forefront of it looks so good, and maybe that's why most people don't end up together, even though seemingly they're very much in love when it starts. So I think going off of that, what are some indications? Because clearly you can't know everything about somebody before you spend your life with them, but how can you get the best picture of who they will be or who they are prior to doing that?
Due diligence.
Exactly. You study there. You make some phone calls, right?
All right. So I know that if I was talking to a Kabbalah teacher right now or someone, they would say, but are you on the same spiritual path? Yeah, really helpful. I guess a lot of people, if they think completely different about things, can cause conflict. So could you bring up kids with that person and feel be happy? Do you have things in common? Do you feel really comfortable with that person? And I think when I was younger, I always said mind, body, and soul. They all have to be ticked. Otherwise, there's going to be an issue. Mm-hmm. I still stick with that.
Absolutely. We look forward to celebrating with you in the UK. Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. I think that it'll be really helpful, not just for our younger listeners, but really how to live a well-rounded life for many viewers here. And it was a good time, so I had a pleasure talking with you. If there's just one thing you can leave our users with, it can be an insight, something to take away, really anything that you would like to have heard as a young adult, early teen, that could have tremendously impacted your life that you know today.
I think it's really building desire. So like getting yourself together and actually saying, get a desire. I don't know if everyone's seen that Michael Jordan Netflix documentary. No. Last Dance, that's the one. He even makes up in his head about someone so he can get really fired up. There isn't desire. How do you fire yourself up enough to really, in a positive way, because not everyone has that desire. So you need to help yourself sometimes, because sometimes you could be knocked off from circumstances or all kinds of things, right? So I think that's the most important thing, because it's hard to really have the engine to complete something if you haven't got the
fuel in it, or the electricity with the EVs in today's day and age. Jamie, always a pleasure, brother. Great speaking with you, and we look forward to having you back on soon. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael.
Jamie.
Awesome, brother. All right. Another episode in the books. It was an absolute pleasure having our recent guest, Jamie True, on. As I'm sure you've noticed, Jamie has a wealth of wisdom, both from a monetary perspective, from a professional perspective, from a spiritual perspective. Very well-rounded individual who really I've learned a lot from personally. As you'll hear in the episode, he and I actually have had many discussions about different businesses that I wanted to start, and he's been a key mentor for me in my life, and that's largely why I wanted to have him on. I think for anybody, but really those of us who are in our 20s and late teens, you can gain just a tremendous amount of wisdom from whether it be starting your own business, working and succeeding in your own company as an employee. He really has a vast array of knowledge to provide. And so our next guest, who's actually a Miami-based individual, for your Floridians, I know our co-host Michael is from Florida, so he'll appreciate that. He grew up self-made. He is an immigrant as well, and he actually started a real estate company in his mid to late 20s, quickly became a success, multi-million-dollar corporation really early on, and now he is looking to raise some more seed funding for a merger and acquisition branch of his corporation. I'll let him share more about that when we have him on. But really, he'll have a wide variety of experience, both for us to learn from, but really it's just an interesting story. And so I look forward to having him on. He recently started studying Kabbalah with our lead teacher in New York, Eitan Yordeni. And yeah, we're gonna have some fun, and I hope you guys can take away a thing or two from him. I surely have, and we look forward to seeing you then. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I know we didn't have time for Q&As this past episode, but for our next episode, please, as always, feel free to send any questions, suggestions, comments, feedback to either myself at davidbergmb@gmail.com or michael.kanowski@kabbalah.com. Thank you, guys.